I don't understand, Kreese murmured. This is Quint Mognis. We ran several background checks before hiring him as an expert on the unknown.
Impossible, Daniel interjected. I've seen with my own 2 eyes Jesper kill and open a gateway to the other world.
I looked at the purple-haired person. Quint, or Jesper. Who exactly are you? Quint sighed.
Things are not always as they seem, Alicia.
A heavy silence came upon us, and for a while, none of us spoke. Not Daniel, the charismatic CEO. Not Kreese, the confused leader. And not even the bubbly Kaz. No, there was only silence. Daniel spoke at last, ordering a very simple order, gesturing to the 2 men guarding Quint.
Take him away. Put him in one of Kaz's cells or something. We'll come back for him after this whole situation is cleared up.
The 2 men chanted, "Yes, sir," and shoved Quint along. Then, strangely, Quint began to struggle, despite his initial calmness. The men seemed surprised at this, and suddenly, Quint seemed to break free, running towards me. Surprised, I stumbled backwards, tripping, only to be caught in time by Quint, who quickly grabbed me in a chokehold. But instead of trying to kill me, he simply whispered, "There are answers in Mayflower Springs." "What?" I replied, only to see Quint being caught again by the 2 men, leading him far into the depths of Kaz's menagerie. Daniel gestured to Kreese to come with him, and the 2 returned to the platform, returning to the surface, leaving me, Archer, and Kaz alone. We looked at each other, all confused.
"What did he just whisper to you?"
Kaz asked. "I don't think we should tell Dr. Kreese or Mr. Shepherd about this," I suggested.
"Why not?"
Archer countered. "I don't know. Something about the way he spoke seemed like he was hiding something," I pointed out.
"All right, fine," Kaz agreed. "But I will tell Mr. Shepherd if it breaches the security of Shepherd Technology."
"Right, sure." I rolled my eyes. Kaz was a bit of a pushover. I was sure a bit of threatening would make him shut up, if it came to that. We heard footsteps in the distance, and Mr. Shepherd's 2 guards returned. We silenced ourselves, waiting until they left, going up the platform.
"What did he say?"
Archer reminded me. "There are answers in Mayflower Springs," I whispered.
"We'll have to go there," Archer suggested. "Kaz, do you have any way for us to head there?"
"No," Kaz confessed. "The only way to leave this place is through Daniel's helicopter. Well, we could just walk."
"Mayflower Springs is a whole hour away,"
Archer pointed out.
"and we don't know what dangerous creatures are out there."
"Plus, we'll need an excuse," I realised. "Can't have Daniel follow us."
"I've got one,"
Kaz murmured.
"I'll say we're going out to find my lost giraffe thing, and I'm bringing you guys along for the ride. As for safety, I have an armory down here, and I've got materials around to help mask our scent." "And Dr. Kreese?"
Archer asked. "We'll tell her anything important once we get back," I determined. "She can stay behind and talk with Mr. Shepherd."
"Then let's do this,"
Archer agreed. Kaz nodded, and led us deeper into the menagerie, passing the zombies, until at last, arriving at the armory. Oddly, Quint was nowhere to be seen, and when I asked Az where he could be, he simply explained that they did not have access to all parts of the facility, and that Quint could be located in a restricted area. Despite that, we were able to get the items we needed for the journey. We sprayed the scent of the natural world on us, took the supplies we needed, and headed out.
"Wait,"
Daniel ordered, just as Kaz informed him we were going giraffe hunting.
"I want you all back in 3 hours."
"Why?" Kaz inquired.
"We're evacuating to our HQ in Kasdan City,"
Daniel explained.
"A team will be here in an hour to help you pack things up."
"We'll be back," Kaz assured, flashing their oh-so-adorable smile. Daniel nodded, then went back to discussing something with Dr. Kreese. We went off to take a walk. Soon, we arrived at the hiking shelter, and seeing that it was open, we entered. Nobody was there, and it looked like creatures had been inside. Patches of the shelter had these moulds growing on it, similar to how the world had been inside the sphere. Archer headed deeper first, checking it out. When he was satisfied there was nothing, we entered. And as I stepped in, a poster caught my eye. It was of a village, a very specific village me and Archer had seen hours before. "Hey, doesn't that look a little familiar?" "No," Kaz replied. "I wasn't talking to you," I shot back. "It looks exactly like the site," Archer gasped. Our eyes traced the poster further. On the bottom was a label. It was an advertisement for a unique vacation resort. "The Mayflower Springs Royal Resort," Kaz read, whispering. "Come take a visit to Mayflower Springs. Feel like royalty in our deluxe compartments. Come see dueling knights, ferocious feasts, horse racing and more." It's not a town then, I realised. It's an overblown resort. "But I don't get it. Why does it look exactly like the site?" Archer puzzled. "I don't know either," I nodded, "but we've got to get there as soon as we can." Kaz simply nodded along. A moment later, we were back on the trail, hiking over to Mayflower Springs. Along the way, we saw the creatures infected by the flesh, and luckily, they ignored us, courtesy of Kaz's sense. As we neared the resort, we began to see signs pointing to it. But weirder was the fact that we were now travelling on a main road, and there were several newly built fences, all prohibiting cars from going further, claiming that the resort was now closed. Soon we arrived, seeing a desolate village all surrounding a well in the centre. A few flashing lights emerged as we entered, awakened by a motion sensor. In the distance, the sun had begun to set, and torches that were clearly electronic buzzed to life, inviting us inside Mayflower Springs. "Looks," Archer pondered for a moment. "Creepy." "I agree," Kaz returned, turning on a flashlight. I laughed. As the sky darkened, bulbous glowing spheres began to emerge from the bushes, almost like fireflies, yet a dozen times bigger. These floating animals seemed to croak, like a frog. The balls of light danced in reds and blues as we explored, a welcome touch to an otherwise abandoned place. Archer pointed up at a building with the words "Management." We entered, breaking down the locked door, finding a messy office, with papers strewn around and desks falling on the floor. "The lights don't work," grumbled Kaz, messing with the switch. "Never mind the light, scientist," Archer argued, pointing the flashlight to the ground. "There's blood." Kaz let out a small yelp. He wasn't too comfortable around blood. I remembered one time when he almost threw up when dissecting a sheep's heart back in college. But sure enough, there was blood everywhere, and a few decomposing bodies. Whatever had happened here had happened quite recently, as the blood was still fresh, sticking to my boots. "Ugh, I hate blood," Kaz moaned. "Somehow, I don't think that's all too important," I replied, searching through the papers strewn around. "Alicia, here!" Archer called, gesturing with a hand to call me over to a dead body. "She's holding something." But what she was holding confused us further. There was an insignia on the paper, stamped clear as day, and for some reason, it was stamped with not the Mayflower Springs insignia we'd seen all through the village. "That's," I murmured, removing the paper from the decomposing hand. "That's the Paracel Industries symbol." "Isn't that the company you two work for?" Kaz questioned. "Indeed," Archer responded. I finished removing the paper, and then began to hold it up against the light. I brushed it, removing flakes of dead skin and the occasional dried bloodstain. Luckily, it was all still readable. "Dear Dr. Shard," the letter began, "us at Paracel Industries have decided to discontinue your operation. The Mayflower Springs operation has been deemed fruitless, and this is an order of immediate evacuation. You will close down the cover of Mayflower Springs to the public, retrieve our equipment, and leave. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was who signed it at the bottom of the letter. Dr. Anacoretta Crease of Paracel Industries, I read. What?
A word of advice, Archer added. Don't put too much faith in Dr. Crease.
It looks like Mayflower Springs was a cover-up for something, Kaz theorized, though what and why we'll need to find out. A few papers later, and I'd found something, dated from a year ago. Dear Dr. Crease, this is the Mayflower Springs operation leader, Gail Shard, I read. We finally managed to open a doorway from our world into the world between. Another world, if you will. What we found is fascinating and world-changing, if I do say so myself. But we found something strange. This person was on the other side, not wearing any masks nor suits, only says that he's Quint Mognis and that we have to stop the doorway, abandon the project. We deemed him unsafe, so we returned back to the lab. How should we proceed? I found another paper dated only a day after. A response from Crease. Ignore Quint Mognis. Proceed as normal. If possible, send samples over to headquarters. Attempt capture of this Quint if possible. He may know more than we. Investigate who or what he is. I rummaged around and then found more papers. There were a bunch with random numbers on them, and a note from Gail lecturing someone with the ridiculous name of Jesus Crease to stop writing passcodes on a sheet of paper. We were able to locate Quint Mognis, and we have captured him. He's in containment now, but he seems unresponsive to our questions regarding who he is. He just keeps telling us to close the doorway before the Devourer knows we're in the other world. We're unsure what he is talking about, but the ground of the other world does seem awfully fleshy, almost alive, and not sapient nor sentient. How do we proceed? And again, a response. Continue on with our research in the other world. I've looked through our files. Disregard Quint Mognis, but keep him in containment. Our files suggest he may know a lot more about this other world. We found him in other files, all warning of the Great Disaster and the coming of an ancient evil. Ramblings of a lunatic. How he's able to survive in the other world, we aren't sure, but treat him as extremely dangerous and make sure he does not escape. Quint Mognis has escaped. He's just gone. We don't know how, but he just isn't in the containment cage we left him behind. He left behind something written in blood. The flesh has awakened. It seeks to make our world like itself. Close the doorway. Furthermore, 2 of our teams in the other world have gone missing. One agent returned, but he was changed into this mindless beast. How do we proceed? Unfortunately, the next letter was covered in blood, and after that was simply the evacuation order. Something major had clearly happened, something big enough to cause an evacuation and death of the woman inside the office. Who exactly is Quint Mognis? Cass murmured. This doesn't make any sense. True, I replied. No, Cass continued. I looked at the dates in these letters. A week after the evacuation date here, he presented himself to Mr. Shepherd, turning himself in as a killer, with the power to open a doorway between worlds. Odd. Yeah, but it gets weirder, Cass told. When he came to us, he told us his powers needed to be studied and to find if there was a way to close the doorways he opened. We were close to finding a way when he opened a doorway, and those hooks grabbed him. After that, all the doorways he made closed on their own. This might be a stretch, I began, but what if he came to Mr. Shepherd for help to close the doorway that Dr. Crease's operation here made? Maybe he could open doorways of his own, but he wasn't able to close them, and he needed help both to close his doorways and the one here. But, Archer cut in, why did a doorway open in the valley? The well? Maybe he didn't die that day when he was pulled in, Cass theorized. He was speaking out against something he called the Devourer, right? Maybe that thing is the flesh. It's awake. Ever since the operation he has stepped foot inside the other world. And so, I continued, Quint, whoever he is, he's someone trying to stop the Devourer from changing our world, and he survived being dragged in and made a doorway out into Mayflower Valley. But something also happened here, Cass theorized. Something that prevented this Devourer from entering through here and the valley instead. And this something, I assume, I began, maybe caused the flesh to look like this exact village. Kaz looked at their watch. Our time is up. We have to get back now if we want to make it in time for the evacuation. We'll have to come back here if we can, I murmured. If we can. Kaz shrugged and began to walk outside.